So, what exactly is the astral plane? Well, like most things, it depends on who you ask. It's been called the place you go to when you have an OBE, aka out of body experience. It's basically known as an etheric realm. It's been called the phase, the fourth dimension, and a lot of other stuff. The only thing that's really agreed upon is that it's an entirely different plane of existence, or alternate dimension from our mundane world. Though there are some who say it's similar to dreaming and takes place all in the mind. That debate's nothing new, because the concept of the astral plane has been with humanity seemingly since the beginning of our recorded existence, and has been documented throughout history in countless traditions, especially the mystery schools of ancient Egypt. But this alleged other plane of existence isn't really possible to pin down in any tangible way, because even within it there are a ton of traditions that believe there are many levels of existence there, and people can see only what they're capable of comprehending. Through this logic, two people could enter the plane through astral projection and have very different experiences. Though the most commonly reported form of the astral is it just being a copy of the waking world. In this sense, it's possible to walk around your room, explore outside, visit family members or friends, and see things basically in real time as if in the material plane. But there's also supposed dangers concerning the astral. There's a very old saying that goes like this: as above, so below, as within, so without. There's different ways you can translate that saying, but to experts on the astral plane, it means based off of what kind of person you are, you may or may not attract certain entities to you. And many of the entities who dwell on the astral plane are nightmare fuel. Some people may even be under the danger of demonic possession during an out-of-body experience. Then again, it can also be a place of profound spiritual enlightenment. A magical place where you can do whatever you want and explore new dimensions in an etheric existence, and basically journey through a timeless world beyond comprehension, where none of the rules of our mundane materialistic world apply. Like usual, I'm not here to tell you any of this is real or not. I'm just here to present you with ideas and a compilation of all my research on the astral plane. And there's going to be a lot of conflicting or contradicting ways to look at it. So don't get discombobulated when it seems like I'm having too many opinions, because I'm gonna tackle it from many traditions' perspectives. What's true or not is up to you to decide. But it is safe to say that this episode is gonna get really weird. The first thing to make clear is there's no single agreed-upon opinion of the astral plane. I've read over a dozen books concerning it, and exactly what the astral is changes from author to author. Or if watching interviews about it, what it is changes from expert to expert, with basically all of them having their own spin on the subject. So I'm not here to offer any supposed truths, because from my research, any truths on the astral plane are more personal perceptions or opinions than anything objective. Despite this, it's a very interesting subject and worthy of debate. Even among the most staunch researchers and believers, there's differences of opinions on what is or is not the astral plane. Native Americans may call it the spiritual plane, and some esoteric teachings say it has 7 levels, others that it has 3 levels. The Occult Theosophical Society has called it the plane of illusion. So there really is a plethora of different opinions and perspectives on the astral. Some of the few consistent ideas being its changeability, and that there are many, many entities that live there completely at home, just like we do in the material plane. And you can allegedly visit here through astral projection, or more commonly called out-of-body experiences by researchers like Robert Monroe and the Monroe Institute, or just OBE for short. If a person is able to leave their body, they can supposedly explore this etheric dimension at will. And attempting to explain this experience has been analogous to trying to tell a blind man how to see, which can speak volumes for the sheer alien nature of consciously journeying in the astral plane when compared to our mundane material world. One of the more common examples of the astral is its basic form just being an energy copy of sorts of all that exists in regular life. Like When someone leaves their body, they can literally look around their bedroom and everything looks pretty normal. They can look down and see their sleeping body in their bed, see all their belongings, look out the window. And a lot of times people tend to see this infinitely extending energy cord that connects their astral form to their physical bodies. This cord is apparently unbreakable, but there are those who say that if it is broken, it means instant death for the astral projector. This energy cord goes wherever they do, and isn't hindered by any sort of obstructions. In the astral plane, a projector can walk around their home, or even go outside walking right through their walls. It's possible to visit friends, or even snoop in places they really shouldn't be. And yeah, everything looks like an exact copy of the material world. This is because the astral and the physical world are intertwined, and basically take place in the same spot, just different frequencies or vibrations. But the astral plane isn't a dimension ruled by hard laws like physics in the material plane, with some experts saying it's even basically a dimension powered by thought. And indeed, thoughts do seem to be far more powerful in the astral, able to alter the dimension in a seemingly instantaneous manner, which fits in with Theosophy calling it the plane of illusion. Because what someone experiences there can have more to do with that person's thoughts and their consciousness's ability to translate the data in a way the astral projector can comprehend than anything objective. As an example, you could have two hypothetical astral projectors looking at the same thing but seeing things totally different. See, because even though we have physical eyes and can look around and see the world, what we see actually isn't real. It's our brain translating electrical signals in our heads. It is theoretically possible to put a brain in a jar and stimulate it in a manner that would emulate real-life existence. Not unsimilar to how humans are plugged in to experience a fake reality in the movie The Matrix. This theoretical brain in a jar would be experiencing a very real reality where it has a body, friends, family, and pretty much lives a normal life. It's really just a matter of sending the right electrical impulses to the brain. In this sense, no one's actually seen anything. They just see the data their brain translates into their mind from the exterior material world. The astral plane is experienced in the same manner, though far more abstract. The person having the OBE sees what their brain can translate from the etheric data of that dimension, which could bring some clarity to why so many people have different opinions on what the astral is like. And there are very unique and different experiences there. So if people have certain beliefs or preconceived notions, it can have a profound impact on what awaits them in the astral plane, which can be a very good thing, but can also be a very, very bad thing. There seems to be a copy of sorts of everything on the material plane, and just like our world, it has animals and predators and scary people. Think about all the bizarrely horrific insects we have on Earth. There are things way more terrifying than them on the astral, which are far more alien to their analogous counterparts in the waking world. And it goes far beyond that to things that were never even remotely human or Earth-like. The astral plane is far more varied and inhabited than all of the wild animals or insects or just plain creatures on this planet, by like a large margin. And many of these entities are primordial in nature, with no sense of logic, empathy, or reason. Unlike our world, energy seems to be the main source of sustenance there. It's basically the food. And in this plane, powered by the speed of thought, thoughts being a form of energy in and of itself, certain vibrational frequencies like the emotion of fear can lead these entities to seek it out like a predator looking for prey. They can literally feed off of these negative emotions. And by that logic, just me telling you that greatly increased your chances of meeting a terrifying entity if you ever try to astral project and are successful. Many have tried to have an intentional OBE, did it, then never tried again because they had a nightmarish encounter. So many researchers do give the advice not to attempt it unless that person is prepared. Courage undaunted is required to be a successful out-of-body traveler. Well, courage and high vibrational emotions like love. which is why many alleged masters of intentional out-of-body experiences preach the need for a calm mind and a detachment from mundane life. People caught up in petty negative associations with their daily life or have heavy superstitions and fear are going to have a real bad time. I have done a lot of research and I found these nightmare-inducing accounts of astral plane encounters very interesting. But I love scary stuff, and a lot of these negative experiences I read about did not disappoint. There's also been a lot of lab-based research into the subject. Probably the most famous organization dedicated to the research of out-of-body experiences is the Monroe Institute, which was founded by a successful businessman named Robert Monroe in the 50s, and has since grown to be a global organization. They're dedicated to expanding the uses and understanding of consciousness. And your host actually learned how to meditate through their products. Robert Monroe's life was changed forever after experiencing what seemed to be a state of consciousness separate and apart from the physical body. His career in business took a U-turn to support his scientific research on the subject. Mr. Monroe wanted to be taken seriously, though, both by the scientific community and common people who heard about his work. So right off the bat, Monroe dropped using terms like the astral plane or astral projecting to avoid the esoteric stigma people may attach to it. The Monroe Institute would use pretty much exclusively the term out-of-body experience, or just OBE, and the company would eventually become pioneers in consciousness research. The first book Monroe wrote on OBEs was called Journeys Out of the Body, released back in 1971. I personally found the book kind of hard to finish, but was still fascinated by it at many times during the read. In the book, he goes into great detail about his out-of-body experiences, and it gets pretty trippy. Monroe talks about existing in a form of consciousness beyond space-time and death itself, which has been a huge source of comfort for thousands of people experiencing paranormal incidents or those in the process of dying. The Institute researched ways of inducing this out-of-body experience in a controlled laboratory manner. They invented a form of binaural beats called hemisync, which synchronizes both sides of the brain and can stimulate brainwaves to bring about different levels of consciousness in the listener. Hemisync works really well once you get the hang of it. I know from experience. Robert Monroe passed, sadly, a while ago, but his legacy still lives on. The Monroe Institute has only grown and is still doing workshops, producing products, and continuing research into consciousness till this day. The Monroe Institute is second to none concerning the topic of out-of-body experiences, and has pretty much touched the lives of millions of people across the world. While they never refer to the place you go during an OBE as the Astral Plane, the organization has nonetheless been vital in presenting the astral to the common people in a scientific manner. Because let's be honest, normal people are not used to hearing about stuff like this. Using all the woo-woo esoteric terms is most likely just going to get eye rolls. So dropping all the occult terminology was a really smart move on their part. But the Monroe Institute is just one of many researchers and OBEs in the astral plane. There's a lot of others, like Robert Bruce and Michael Verduga? I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but he's the author of The Phase. Tom Campbell's a famous one too. He has a pretty popular book called My Big Toe. I could go on. There's a lot, though. The researchers go all the way from very scientific method-focused to the more woo-woo cringe-inducing type of people. So there is no shortage of different perspectives concerning the topic. Early on in my own research, that actually started years ago, I was confused about how each author seemed to contradict another. For example, some researchers say you can remember everything clearly in the astral because it's such an intense experience, while others say you have to train yourself to remember, or learn to analyze the data around you correctly. And if you don't, the journey out of your body will fade from conscious memory just like a dream. Researcher Robert Bruce says that every single person and animal astral project every night when they sleep, and that we're just unaware of it. While others say it's a much more rare, mystical, and profoundly spiritual experience, not common or naturally occurring at all. These Discrepancies can't just be brushed aside by a logic-based mind. And who could blame them? For reasonable deduction, it's simple to conclude it's all a bunch of nonsense people make up to sell books to the naive. Based off all the contradictions, being skeptical is a perfectly logical response in every way. The thing is, though, in order to really comprehend what the astral plane is, it can't be looked at through a dogmatic materialistic perspective. The etheric plane isn't under the strict rule set imposed upon the waking material world. Experiences there are going to be unique to each and every individual person, and what they think and their opinions has a huge influence on how the etheric dimension is presented to them, and what they're able to comprehend there. The basic OBE may seem like still in the material world of sorts, but that type of experience is really just the tip of the iceberg, because there is many layers to the astral plane, not to mention the countless entities who reside there. Someone with little spiritual development is said to not be able to experience the astral in a way even close to somebody who's got a dedicated practice expanding their consciousness. And someone who's never learned to control their emotions and thoughts is much more likely to have a nightmarish experience. The different levels of the astral plane can be analogous to a thermometer. You have the two polarities of hot and cold, symbolic for good and bad, respectively, or light and dark, or high vibrations and low vibrations. And like on a thermometer, there's many temperatures in between, representing the countless shades of gray. The energy of thought is one of the things that governs the astral plane, and these thoughts and a person's vibrations dictate where they can or can't go. Like, a low-vibrating, fear-based person won't have access to the higher, more positive levels of the astral plane, for example. And a high-vibrating person will be able to avoid the darker and more unsettling aspects of the etheric dimension. Just like predators in our material plane, there's something always on the hunt. And obviously, these entities are to be avoided. In the books I've read on the astral, many authors try to say that these entities can't kill you. Though this may be a false security I would take with a grain of salt. Don't get me wrong, the majority of the time, these attacks are totally non-fatal, no matter how mentally traumatizing they may be. But giving into the darker emotions, especially fear, will feed them. So these entities will try to cause as much horror in their victims as possible. Sleep paralysis is said to be one of these moments a person is open to the astral plane, being between waking and sleep consciousness. And if someone suffering from sleep paralysis gives in to fear, it's like lighting a candle in the darkness for these entities to be able to see you. And to some, this explains the documented encounters of waking nightmares with shadow people and the like during sleep paralysis. They come to feed on the energy, to feed on the fear. This theory covers all supposed entity encounters in paralysis. Like the old hag syndrome, the demonic old lady who crawls onto people's chests to choke them while they're in paralysis, or just the classic incubus and incubi tales. The lore surrounding sleep paralysis goes back all throughout human history, and the entities encountered, whether hallucinations or not, are as varied as the cultures who've experienced them. It's almost like it's a matter of cultural belief which gives these entities the form they take. A Christian may see a demon. Some others may see a vampire. UFO enthusiasts would see aliens. Not saying alien abductions or encounters aren't real, though. Just saying that during sleep paralysis, people who actually seem to see entities in the room varies depending on that person's cultural or personal beliefs, which very much seems similar to how the astral plane molds to the consciousness perceiving it. There is nothing outside of our perception of reality, which is reflected like a mirror from each individual consciousness. If this has gone over your head, you may wonder what sleep paralysis has to do with the astral plane. And, well, actually a lot. Because in a lot of techniques, to purposely initiate an OBE, the body has to be asleep with the mind fully awake, which translates to intentionally putting yourself in sleep paralysis. This transitioning stage between wakefulness and sleep can be pretty trippy, which is why the mainstream consider anything seen during sleep paralysis to be hallucinations of technically dreaming while awake. But to a lot of writers who research this type of stuff, the astral plane is literally where our consciousness goes when our physical bodies are asleep. Then when we're there while sleeping, the subconscious constructs dream worlds around us. It's just one way to look at it, but many proponents of astral travel do subscribe to this point of view. But at the same time, sleep paralysis is just one of the ways to enter the astral plane, which is good because it's hands down the scariest. Getting too much into dream theories on the astral plane, though, may take us too far off topic. I am open to the idea, of course, but lucid dreaming and astral projecting are definitely two different things. Because lucid dreaming is pretty much harmless, whereas astral projection is another beast entirely, filled with even more life forms than our material plane of Earth, and a lot of those beings with no interest in the well-being of humans who journey there. But it is actually possible to wake up in a lucid dream and intentionally project into the astral plane, which is interesting and has led many to believe that there is an extremely fine line between the dream world and the astral. In order to really comprehend the astral, like I said earlier, first somebody has to let go of their materialistic conceptions, which can be hard to do considering most modern societies condition us from birth to be limited to a dogmatic philosophy of materialism, then call it science. Don't get me wrong though, I'm not dissing or throwing out science. I love science. My mom's a chemist and a physicist, but it is a belief system all its own, and was corrupted by the ambitions of big business, corporations, and politics a long time ago. You know, people who pay big bucks so the mainstream believes what they want people to believe. A lot of scientific projects are fully funded by these wealthy elite people, and it's naive to think that this doesn't influence whatever scientific project is being worked on, and totally influence the outcome. So science is amazing and awesome, and I love it, but it's not even close to the infallibility most people think it is. We laugh at science from 100 years ago, just like in 100 years, they're going to laugh at our science too. And the materialist is limited to what scientists have to say that they've never met, or have any idea of their moral character, and are funded by amoral corporations with no goodwill towards the common people. So in order to understand the astral, you gotta let go of the materialist thought process. The astral plane is actually all around us and interpenetrates the physical world, but the physical vessel is limited to the material plane. What we do have to represent us there is the astral body, which actually has a bunch of different names from various traditions, like the etheric double, the astral body, the subtle body, the energy body, etc. It's a part of us at all times and can even contain our consciousness. As an example, from the opinion that when we dream we're actually in the astral plane, our astral body is what we go there in. Though there is a lot of different perspectives on this, and it can get real confusing real quick. So I'm not going to go into depth of all the various beliefs and just try to keep it simple and easier to understand. Let's just say the astral body is our avatar, and literally everybody has one. They're invisible to the common masses, and the only way to actually see one in the waking world is to have a healthy pineal gland, aka the third eye. And a person requires a certain amount of spiritual development, too. But if the requirements are met, then somebody could actually see another person astral projecting. Though these astral bodies have been seen by everyday people if enough energy is exerted. Some traditions and researchers say this could explain ghostly phenomenon. Not that the astral body is what many might refer to as a soul, the immortal consciousness of people, or whatever belief you may subscribe to, listener. But indeed, in many traditions, people can live on past death in their astral bodies. Some even claim that the astral is a level of the afterlife, and that people can actually construct their own hells or heavens based off of what they believed in life, because thoughts can construct entire worlds on the astral plane as believable as any. You may be dead and in the astral plane right now listening to this and not even realize it. And what I'm telling you right now, being the only clue conjured up by your subconscious. But in all the traditions, it's almost always a temporary stay. Human beings are shattered creatures, and we must be reassembled just like the Egyptian legend of Osiris. There is much more to us than our physical bodies, and the astral body is our vehicle for our consciousness into that plane of ether. With the astral body, humans can project their consciousness wherever they want to go, be it in the physical world or other worlds entirely, or even through time, though just as an observer. In the astral, space and time really have no meaning other than what the consciousness within gives it. And it's really impossible to try and find words that can properly describe how the astral body's relationship with the astral plane works. But it's safe to say the projector is only limited by their own beliefs, emotional state, vibrations, and spiritual development. Thought is action there. So the possibilities can be wondrous or horrifying. And an undisciplined mind who allows thoughts to run around rampant however they wish will not be able to navigate this plane very easily. A simple desire can cause a person's experience to spiral into chaos, leading to a snowball effect that completely ruins a person's goals when visiting there, much to the frustration of the unprepared astral projector. With the astral body, everything feels real if touched. And in the basic OBE, it all looks very real too. Though sometimes there are people who have difficulty opening up their astral eyes. Sometimes a simple but demanding thought is enough to open them. But sometimes the astral hands have to literally rip them open. Most of the time, though, it's not going to be an issue. At first, vision is pretty much how it is in everyday life. But with practice and intention, the astral body can have a spherical vision of 360 degrees. Though in the beginning and for a while, people's vision is going to be limited to how they're used to in their physical bodies. In fact, their astral body will pretty much be a copy of their physical body. Arms, legs, fingers, etc. A lot of people prefer to stay this way, which is fine, but the astral body is in no way stuck in the humanoid form. The silver cord that connects the body to the astral body is basically always present. It's invisible apparently to some people, but that's rare. It is always there though, whether it can be seen or not. Oddly enough, the silver cord of the astral body is even mentioned in the Bible. The passage is in Ecclesiastes 12, verses 6 through 7, and I quote, "Remember him, before the silver cord is severed, or the gold bowl is broken, before the pitcher is shattered at the spring, or the wheel broken at the well, and the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it." End quote. Those are all symbolic for death. Hence, if the silver cord of the astral body is cut, that person is dead. There's a lot of interesting stories about what a person can do with their astral bodies, like generating armor around them or even a shield if they see a dark entity, or extending their limbs out great distances like they're elastic or something, or even having a part of their body like fade out of existence for a second where it's about to be attacked. With experience, the astral body can take on the form of animals, inanimate objects, or any type of bizarre thing the imagination can think of. But many experienced astral projectors just take on the form of an energy ball. The sensations possible in the astral body can be just as real, if not more so, than the physical body. All the senses seem to pretty much be present, and sometimes even enhanced. This means that the astral can be a very pleasurable experience. You can even have sex in the astral body, either with other astral projectors or even entities who live there. Some people have reported seemingly godlike beings that take affection to them, and have many sexual encounters with them over long periods of time, if not an entire lifetime. In this form, it doesn't have any of the dangers of sex in the physical world, just pure bliss. Though it's still bad karma to have sex with entities or other projectors in the astral behind a partner's back who you know wouldn't be cool with it. And there's a dark side for everything good. So there's also a ton of negative entities out there to trick and maybe even enslave a naive astral projector through seduction. The incubus or the incubi, for example. They don't have to go by these names, of course, but entities like them will use the sexual energy to feed off the victim like a parasite, reducing their lifespan by a lot, and according to some people, even possibly killing them. But it definitely always influences physical health in a negative way. So, just like in the real world, sex in the astral body isn't something to just screw around with recklessly, and could have negative lifelong consequences. Still, basically, any of the physical sensations in the waking world, the astral body can experience too. This includes pain. An example of this is an encounter somebody reportedly had, but whom I won't name. They were just exploring their home city in their astral body, when suddenly they noticed a dark form vaguely in the shape of a man staring at them from the top of a building a ways away. Unsettled, this astral projector turned and tried to avoid the entity by losing it through a neighborhood. But every time that person turned around to look, the entity got a little closer. And then panic set in, and the person tried to get away as fast as they could. But all of a sudden, the entity popped up right in front of them out of nowhere. Its face was pale, with a menacing grin. It didn't have ears or hair, and the thing's eyes were wide, bloodshot, and bulging. But what really stood out was at the center of the thing's forehead was a large, blazing, red third eye. It sucked the projector's astral body into this eye, and it felt like they were being shredded into 1,000 pieces, the projector feeling the pain of every cut just as if they were being sliced by a knife in the real world. The shock of so much pain immediately caused the projector to return to their physical body and wake up. Not only this, but the entity now knew where the person lived, and stuck around to cause more pain for some time before eventually being banished. This person made the mistake of giving in to fear, and really lacked the knowledge needed and was unprepared for the astral plane. It is a good example, though, that pain is just as real there as it is here in the waking world. It's also a good example that if a dark entity is encountered, though you may return to your body at the speed of thought through the silver cord, it's not really a good idea to do so, because space-time has no solid grasp there, and the entity can really easily follow you home, which obviously sucks hard for anybody without the know-how to deal with such a situation. It's always better to deal with entities then and there in the astral plane. In this case, though, this person didn't have much of a choice because of the trauma and was really taken off guard. But it's still better to face issues there while still having an OBE. It takes courage to successfully traverse the astral plane, and any negative entities should be faced boldly. In the astral, the supernatural should be thought of as natural, and horrifying things should be laughed at. But depending on where the consciousness is being projected with the astral body, and the frequency reality being journeyed in, these negative beings can be avoided altogether. They mostly inhabit the base astral plane that's basically a copy of our physical world, as well as all the many, many lower levels. But then again, somebody's astral body can only travel to the higher planes based off of the level of their spiritual growth, high vibrational purity, and overall worthiness. So the mid to lower levels of the astral plane are much easier for the average person to explore, which comes with many dangers. But the more a person gains experience in this non-physical world, the more the dangers diminish. The key is getting used to existence in the astral body, which is so alien compared to being in the physical body, it can take some time. For example, in the astral body, things are only as physical as the person having the OBE wants them to be. Walking on the floor or leaning against a wall can be comforting because we're used to it. But if the projector wants, they could just sink through the floor, or even pass through a wall with basically relative ease. And since we're used to gravity, that can be a thing too if that's what the projector wants. But in the astral body, gravity means nothing. In fact, most people first experience consciousness in the astral body floating in their room above their bed. But the coolest part is the ability to straight up fly, which is what many new OBE experiencers do early on because it's so exciting and awesome. And with experience down the line, a projector can even learn how to travel in their astral body, almost like teleporting, I guess. With practice, you can basically move at the speed of thought throughout the astral highways. I don't want to seem too concise, though. There's a lot of different opinions and perspective on how the astral body functions. But the consistent thing that basically all traditions have in common is experience. There is no replacement for experience. The more exposure to the astral plane, the more a projector can do with their astral body. It will grow and evolve just like the consciousness using it as a vessel. But early on, the astral body will be limited by the beliefs of physical reality rigidly ingrained into the projector's conscious notions as well as subconscious ones. It may take time to break free of the limitations programmed into the projector from their physical waking reality in their daily life. An initial astral projection differs from person to person. There are rare accounts of people doing it spontaneously out of nowhere with no intention to do so or even any knowledge on the subject, which basically scares the hell out of people across the board. This is what happened to one of the most famous researchers of OBEs, Robert Monroe. Before Monroe's spontaneous OBE experience, he was just a regular, successful businessman with little to no interest in esoteric or spiritual matters. But after his random out-of-body experiences while sleeping, he would go on to devote the rest of his life and money around researching the phenomenon. These out-of-nowhere astral projections are pretty scary because the person is most likely indoctrinated into materialist dogma and has no clue what's going on. Interesting enough, though, these people who have spontaneous OBEs with no knowledge on the subject are actually more safe from negative entities than those well-versed on the topic, and they try to do it intentionally. The ignorance of their existence is like a shield in a way. But according to some, they could also be under the protection of unseen high-vibrational forces. Typically, these projections don't really last very long, and the person rarely explores beyond their bedroom. And that's if they can even figure out how to move. In any case, the experience usually opens up the person's mind to many abstract spiritual ideas, and convinces them that they are far more than their physical bodies. Some researchers on the subject consider these random OBEs to be the hand of fate or the work of some higher power, like they were destined for something and are chosen. Which I guess kinda makes sense because these people's lives are usually changed forever and completely alters their former life path and ambitions. Take that with a grain of salt, though, because a chosen one mentality can be dangerous and annoying, not to mention snowflake syndrome or an unbalanced and unhealthy ego. But for those who intentionally have OBEs, the experience can be quite different. They most likely have a bunch of techniques learned and have a lot of ideas in their head on what to expect. In the book, The Astral Projection Guidebook, Mastering the Art of Astral Travel by author Erin Polina, her first experience happened at the age of 15 after a lot of failures in trying to have an intentional OBE. Erin was first aware that something was off by an overwhelming sense of tingling throughout her body. Then she realized she could see her room perfectly in the dark even though her eyes were closed, and she felt presences in the room with her. During all this, a very loud whining sound boomed inside of her head. Then the presences in the room began to pull her astral body out of her physical body. She became so frightened that it brought a halt to the projection and she woke up, then ran to go turn on the lights. Though Erin didn't fully make it out of her body, the experience did affect her profoundly. I really liked this book. It was one of the most page-turning that I have on the topic. Erin has a swaggering, quirky personality that really comes out in her writing. I'll leave a link to her book, The Astral Projection Guidebook, in the show notes. I definitely recommend it. Other examples of an initial OBE experience don't always have to seem so frightening, like with entities trying to pull people out of their bodies and whatnot. The initial tingling sensations or vibrations throughout the body are pretty typical though. And when finally out of the body, Some accounts speak of like a gray, misty, ether-like substance in the air, and that everything in their room may look like it does in waking life, other than being made up of this strange gray ether-like substance. Many people have similar experiences of the world around them just being slightly off. Like it's not always a gray ether. Some people see things in an etheric bluish tint, looking ghostly and whatnot. Some people even see it as a green tint. Everything looks the same, just off. All their belongings and furniture are right where they left them, and the sleeping physical body can be seen clearly on the bed. But there are those who don't see any weird tints or anything like that. Some people see the astral plane looking literally exactly the same, just like in physical reality. They can see their body on the bed, look around their room and house, and everything looks pretty much exactly the same. The astral plane has been referred to as the fourth dimension by many experts on the subject. So, though things can appear just like real life to some, or just a little off to others, it can also appear mind-bogglingly bizarre, as in being able to see all things from all sides and perspectives at the same time, or seeing straight through everything with a 360-degree sight. This way of viewing the astral can not only be entirely unsettling, but really confusing, like moving through water in an alien environment. Many people who experience it this way just end up giving up their astral exploration because it's so psychedelic and difficult to comprehend. But they can, with practice, learn to decipher everything and be able to explore eventually if they just don't give up. Eventually, most astral travelers can actually choose how their astral body interacts with the ether, and how it deciphers the data around them to be able to be comprehended by their consciousness. In a sense, learning to translate everything that looks so bizarre to what it represents in the physical world. So, no matter how many speed bumps a person may come across in the astral plane, there's always ways around them to those with the tenacity and sheer stubbornness not to give up. For the most part, though, the part of the astral plane that makes up Earth is going to look pretty much just like its physical counterpart. There's even astral weather and whatnot emulating what's going on in the waking world. And still, that's just the basic exit location when we first leave our bodies. Like I said, there's many higher and lower levels of the astral, and these aren't as easy to explore. They require a lot of practice and dedication to traverse. And there's still many realms that are just straight up inaccessible to humans. With many places so alien to human comprehension, they're beyond understanding to an average human mind. Like in some traditions, as you go higher, communication becomes less verbal. Now, there's many different beliefs. This is just one. But the higher you go, the more you communicate through the projection of symbolism and emotion, which can be pretty rough for people used to verbal communication. And just as you'd think, as you go lower, it just gets more dark and twisted, with entities just getting more and more dangerous. There's tons of places with secret domains or forbidden locations that hide secret knowledge and mysterious beings, like sacred woods with a primordial creature in the center older than the dinosaurs, or labyrinth-like crypts hiding entities who have hoarded the histories of countless worlds come and gone throughout the eons. Some deadly and horrible, with others friendly and willing to share their knowledge. Some traditions even speak of vast astral wars between factions there, with some areas having constant struggle between opposing forces. But there's also many places of learning, and entire groups of entities dedicated to the study of countless subjects beyond human comprehension. A good rule of thumb to many expert astral projectors is if it exists in the material world, it exists there in one form or another too. Though often it's much different. But remember, this is the non-Earth plane of the astral I'm talking about. But these entities can travel around just like an astral projector and can go pretty much anywhere open to their state of vibration. In some mystery traditions, the Egyptian god Thoth is said to be sometimes in the astral plane. His name is also sometimes pronounced Thoth or Tot, but if you want to get old school, his original Egyptian name is Tehuti, Also, sometimes spelled with a D and a J at the beginning, like Jehuti. But Tehuti is fine. I normally prefer Thoth, but that's just because that's how he was introduced to me as a kid. Anyway, Thoth has his legendary emerald tablets there that hold all of his wisdom and knowledge on, many topics. The tablets there are insanely valuable for many reasons, and Thoth only grants them to the worthy. But there's much more metaphysical knowledge to be obtained on the astral plane other than Thoth's emerald tablets. According to many traditions, there's something called the Akashic Records. Now, I have to say right off the bat that the Akashic Records only really mean anything to those who believe in reincarnation. But essentially, Akashic Records are the documentation of all a person's past lives. A lot of people say it's a literal library, like where you go and read a book. Others say it's a lot more mental and cerebral, not an actual library. But as everyone experiences the astral differently based off of their personal notions and beliefs, there really isn't a wrong way to look at it. But many astral projectors do claim that examining one's own records and all the lives they've lived is an excellent way to understand who you truly are, and the path that must be taken for the most productive evolution of one's soul. Those who believe this say it gives the rest of one's life a purpose and clarity they didn't have before that drives them the rest of their lives to bigger and better things. People who view their Akashic records are rumored to basically be overwhelmingly successful at whatever they put their minds to. But most importantly, it leads to profound spiritual enlightenment. It's considered quite an adventure to search for and eventually discover the Akashic records in the astral plane. But if the astral traveler is lucky, they can even have certain entities just take them there. One of the interesting aspects of the prime astral plane that's a copy of Earth is if a projector has friends who are also interested in OBEs, they can actually leave their bodies together and interact and explore and do stuff. They can train their astral body together, watch each other's backs, or even assist in getting their friends out of their bodies. That won't work on normal people, though. And even people experienced with the astral can find themselves on the defensive if not prepared for an astral visitation. In fact, there's many stories of projectors getting owned by their friends' psychic defenses, most of the time just because they didn't know they were coming, but it usually sends that person right back to their body. For example, an astral traveler goes out to visit another, and there's an intimidating entity there that sends their astral bodies back with no small amount of discomfort. So it's always good to give another projector a heads up that you're going to be visiting them. And trying to pull regular people out of their bodies is just going to scare the crap out of them, making them think that you're a ghost or something. Traveling to the non-Earth realms of the astral plane is a lot more difficult with companions. They may not phase at the same time, or go to the wrong places. It takes a lot of experience to be able to travel beyond the Earth astral plane with another astral projector. Not to mention there's many places that astral projectors just can't go based off of their spiritual development, vibration, and overall worthiness. So a lot of times, if journeying through the astral with a companion, they'll find that one of them has access somewhere where the other is blocked. One of the more bizarre aspects of the astral is the ability to move through time. This is highly advanced, though, so it's not a very common experience for astral travelers. When one's consciousness is projected into their astral body in the fourth dimension, they're no longer limited by space-time. Yet, traveling through time is much more difficult than just journeying in an average OBE. It requires an insanely disciplined mind and an incredibly powerful and focused will. You may be thinking, well then, why don't people just go back in time and prove what actually happened in history and enlighten all the rest of us on all the errors? Well, first of all, no one from mundane society would ever believe that. But eventually, Every time traveling astral projector comes to the conclusion that it doesn't really matter. With all the dedication and spiritual growth it requires to actually do this, by this point the astral traveler is way beyond the petty nonsense of the mundane world. And even if they wanted to share their discoveries with the public, it's common knowledge among the awakened that people don't want to be enlightened. Common people don't want to be saved. They don't want the blinds or the veil removed from them. And that's okay. If subscribing to the belief in reincarnation, every soul progresses in the way it's meant to, and ignorant or limited existences are meant to be experienced. In our heavily indoctrinated society with dogmatic materialism, common people do not want their beliefs shaken. Even if what's being said to them is true or beneficial and enlightening, they're more likely to react with violent repulsion to anything that shakes up the reality they've accepted. History proves many times over that they'll even attack or try to destroy whatever it is that shakes their reality. And at the first moment, anyone they believe has authority comes along and says something's BS, they'll accept it without question. So, obviously it's wise to keep such astral travels to oneself. Nobody cares what really happened in history because they're all too busy accepting the made-up version. And metaphorically, if you go against the grain too much, the herd will crucify you. Also, there are many limitations of time travel in the astral. Like, you can't influence anything there. You can only see as an observer. Though in one of Robert Monroe's books, he did go forward very far and even interacted with a future human. So I guess there's exceptions. The world Monroe saw in the future was very, very different than our modern Earth. But at least humans weren't extinct, and we actually seemed to be much more mature as a species. I must say, though, there's a lot of people who disagree with how this works, the astral time travel stuff. But that's pretty normal concerning the astral plane, and the astral projectors who can do this are a minority. But apparently it is possible to go see who killed JFK and mysterious things like that throughout history, as well as checking out the dinosaurs. But who's to say there isn't many or infinite alternate timelines like the multiverse theory suggests? This complicates it more, but I can't really resist thinking about it based off of what I know about quantum physics. Then again, this is the plane of illusion, so it could be totally pointless to try and make sense of what's truly ineffable. Time travel's pretty out there, but there's even more otherworldly aspects to this etheric dimension, like traveling the very cosmos itself. With practice, somebody having an OBE can actually leave Earth and travel through the stars at the speed of thought. Though it's important to remember that people only see what their consciousness is able to translate in a way that their minds can comprehend. But there are astral travelers who have written about meeting aliens on other worlds in the universe, whom are multidimensional, just like humans, with an astral body and everything. Most are much, much more ancient than humans, and incredibly more spiritually evolved. But, like usual, there always has to be bad guys out there too. But most of the aliens encountered in this way seem to be non-hostile, or indifferent. A lot, though, are actually pretty open to the idea of telling the projector all about their species and planet, and basically anything they want to know. Some have even taken on a teacher-type role, enlightening the traveler on the very nature of the universe itself. It is very interesting that so many aliens in the astral pretty much seem to be benevolent towards humans. Seems fishy. Because that's if they're actual aliens in their astral bodies in the first place. Knowing what we know about the astral so far, they could totally just be an astral entity pretending to be aliens. And it would take a special type of astral projector to be able to see through the glamour. But then again, they could also just be totally legit aliens. Now, I've been talking a lot about entities in the astral plane this whole episode. So let's end this focusing solely on the inhabitants of the astral plane. I really wasn't joking when I said that there are some pretty unsettling things that prowl the etheric plane. Beings that are horrifying visually, with many that feed off of negative vibrations to sustain them. There's also many that are just simply sadistic, who take great pleasure in basically just tormenting whoever crosses their path. But there's also incredibly scary-looking entities that don't intend any harm. They're just unaware that their appearance is so grisly to look upon for a human, which obviously can inspire fear anyway, but no harm can come from it. There's also many entities that are just simply led by instinct, and are more animalistic and primal in nature. Prey is prey to them, and though there's little sentience or complex thoughts, they will follow through with their instincts. But there is a balance to things, so you can't have bad without good, darkness doesn't exist without light, and basically all the countless shades of gray in between. So there's tons of neutral and positive entities as well. And there's a lot of room for interpretation concerning these astral beings. They can be seen in many different ways. A lot of times what's actually seen is a symbolic representation of the entity, which is interpreted by the person's consciousness in a way their mind can comprehend it. However, this interpretation can actually be incredibly accurate at times, depending on a variety of different factors. A veteran of induced OBEs is going to see things pretty accurately. But at the same time, just like humans aren't limited to a single form in their astral bodies, there's a lot of entities that can transform too. Some spirits can intentionally take on a very scary form or a pleasant one at will. This does depend on the entity though, because there are differing levels of awareness in them. Some are like zombies, whereas others are highly conscious. This level of awareness can limit the forms they may take, and that's even if they're aware that they can alter their form in the first place. The inhabitants of the astral plane are even more varied than the creatures that live on the physical plane of Earth. So there's little objectivity, but astral travelers have come to classify them as best a human journeying in the ether is able. And there's a big difference of entities that can be encountered depending on where the astral body is being projected. The prime material plane has a cascade of bizarre entities, but things just get weirder and weirder as you travel beyond it. Like if someone is new to the astral plane and all of a sudden they're surprised by a dark entity and it drags them to a lower plane, only to then find themselves surrounded by nightmare creatures in a hellish environment. The lower planes can be incredibly bizarre and quite horrible to look upon or try and make sense of. Eventually, one can learn to kick the crap out of these negative entities. But there's a huge difference in threat levels, some being far more dangerous than others. But then again, many are harmless, many are friendly, and there are even ones that will protect, guard, or guide an astral traveler. We'll start with the elementals, which is actually a very broad category. For a strange example, they could be analogous to Pokemon. All of the Pokemon are classified as Pokemon, but there's a whole crapload of different kinds. Elementals can be looked at in a similar way. However, they do roughly fall into two categories: the natural elemental and the artificial elemental. The natural ones are all pretty different from one another. All the mystical creatures from folklore traditions around the world fit into this category, like elves, gnomes, dryads, and I'm not going to try it. Just basically whatever you can think of concerning mythological things from all the cultures throughout human history. But there's also elementals that are part of the elements and govern the physical nature of their phenomenon in the waking material world. And you do know them. They're fire, earth, water, and air. These entities operate more similar to a hive mind and are more a force of nature than intellectual creature. That is until we talk about the big boys of these elemental groups, because they are fully sentient and highly intelligent. Like a queen bee, they direct the other elementals of their kind and are the leaders and taskmasters, I guess. And elementals have a much easier time imposing their will or manifesting themselves on our physical plane. They're pretty neutral for the most part, but can swing either way. And you do not want to piss them off. Science can't explain spontaneous human combustion, but according to the lore on elementals, it's actually caused by a pissed off fire elemental. Then there's other elementals like the Jinn, who are known as genies in Western civilization and were made famous by the Disney movie Aladdin, though Jinn are nothing like how they're portrayed in that movie. Just like the alpha elementals, they can also influence or manifest themselves in the physical world pretty easily. And they too range from good to bad to infinite shades of gray. Jinn have different levels of power and are also very dangerous if angered. You know, there's a lot more natural elementals, but I'll just throw them into that category if we come across them. Otherwise, we'll be here forever talking about them, because there's a lot. For now, let's just move on to their counterparts, the artificial elementals. These elementals are created both intentionally and through accidental ignorance. The first one of these types that I'm going to go over is called a tulpa. When enough focus and thought energy is directed into creating one of these entities, either by an individual, group, or an entire society, it creates something called a tulpa. Tulpas can be very dangerous because they eventually take on a will of their own, for good or evil, usually evil, and has the same strong desire to live and survive as any living creature in the waking world, and will do so at any cost. They can haunt their creators and be a huge pain to get rid of. Any being humans have ever worshipped, been afraid of, or simply had enough people thinking about it is given life on the astral plane. Think about that for a second and what that means. They can only live as long as they're being sustained through the thought energy, though, but will do whatever they can in their power to continue their existence, including adapting to a different form of thought energy to sustain them, or manipulate humans into actions which will continue the energy flowing. The much lesser form of a tulpa is just a thought form. Literally billions of these thought forms are created by people through thoughts and emotions, but most die shortly after being born since the person who created them's thoughts turn elsewhere. These thought forms are not even close at all to being as dangerous as a tulpa, but they can be nourished and empowered too. For example, a consistent prayer of protection for a loved one can create a thought form that hovers around that person trying to protect them. And as long as that person keeps on praying, it'll just make the thought form stronger. Or focused thoughts of hate can create a thought form that will do whatever it can to mess with whatever thing or person the hate is directed at. They usually aren't powerful enough to make a huge difference, but they definitely can influence to a degree. These thought forms can even be self-directed, either helping or hurting their creator. But when the thought energy that formed them fades, they die. Like if someone was going through a deep depression for a month or so, and then all of a sudden felt better, in the astral plane, there'd be a bunch of thought forms just dropping dead who needed that depression energy to survive. Don't feel too bad though, because there's probably a bunch of astral parasites on you right now and you just don't know it. These types of elementals are the most dangerous when created by a magician, mystic, yogi, shaman, or any other dedicated esoteric spiritual practitioner. In this way, they can even be made into spirits all their own, or even something called a servitor. Though other spirits can be made into a servitor too, it doesn't have to just be a thought form. And these servitors can take on a life spanning years to even far beyond their creator's death. Family guardian spirits could fall into this category. It's also how curses work in certain ways, and even familiars, or even local village gods of our ancestors. This can also be the type of entity I talked about earlier, with an astral projector going to visit their friend who also astral projects, but unannounced, and gets their butt kicked by an entity guarding their room. And then there's the egregore, which is an entity that is a form of like the group or faction or organization. It's hard to explain, but basically all groups have an egregore of sorts. Honestly, the lore on elementals is pretty vast, and even with what I said, there's tons of different ways to look at it, and tons of different opinions on different traditions. There's countless types of natural elementals and artificial elementals, but they all are very much alive in the astral plane. Next up, we have the shadow people, which are more well known than the elementals. These are dark and malevolent entities who inhabit the astral plane. In order to continue their existence, they have to absorb negative energies to keep their vibrations stable. They're usually stalking around areas where bad stuff happens, like abusive family homes. They really like to follow around violent criminal psychopaths, and will lurk basically anywhere that pain and suffering is abundant. They'll also follow around feeding off people who are depressed, suicidal, or filled with rage and envy. Though they absorb all the negative emotions, it's fear that is a delicacy to them. They're probably most famous for being seen by sufferers of sleep paralysis. And shadow people look like their namesake, a shadowy silhouette of a man darker than night. There are variations, of course, but most can be summed up in that manner. But they can also have glowing red eyes that paralyze people with fear or even put suggestive thoughts into people's minds. I have come across a resource of information that claimed that shadow people were once human. But in all the research that I've done for shadow people and whatnot, there's only been one resource that stated this. The majority of information regarding them states that they have never been human. Some say shadow people were given life over the eons as a reflection of emotions coming from humans in the physical world. Others say that they're just straight-up primordial interdimensional entities. The only consistency between all opinions on the shadow people is they feed on negative emotions, and will do whatever it takes to bring out these feelings in their victims, fear being the most desired emotion. But there's a lot of parasite-type entities, which include certain elementals and native spirits. So many, in fact, they're hard to categorize. Imps are another type of these energy feeders, and can appear in many different ways, but mostly appear as tiny bat-like humanoids. They move and attack in swarms, but are probably the easiest entities to ward off, and are easily startled and quick to run away. They really only look for easy meals, unless they're starving, that is. Then there's poltergeists, incubi, succubi, and a whole bunch of other parasites. But I think we went over them enough. Another type of inhabitant found in the astral is actually human. The magician or an apprentice. But basically any occult or esoteric practitioner. They could be shamans, medicine men, mystics, you name it. They're going to have much more influence in the astral plane than a common astral projector. Sometimes they even stay there between lives, practicing their craft as they wait for a new suitable reincarnation. Depending on the person, they can be very helpful, even guiding or protecting the astral travelers, or they could just be indifferent, but they'll never be outright harmful, unless they're disrespected or get pissed off somehow. They can usually be found in crazy astral dwellings they created, with fantastically psychedelic scenery surrounding it. But they can also be found randomly anywhere in the plane based off of their own ambitions. If a projector is lucky, they can be teachers of great wisdom, and reveal secrets of the many layers of the astral plane. The only way they can be made into an objective threat to the projector is if they're angered in some way. But that can be avoided with common sense and common decency. A good rule of thumb is to always have the utmost manners when interacting with beings on the etheric plane. Then there's their counterpart, the left-hand practitioner, the dark occultist, or the dark magician. They're amoral, and they have fellowship with very evil forces, though they will be limited where they can go in the astral plane because of their low vibrations. But they are depolarized, so they'll have a lot more places they can go than other negative entities. They're all about domination and control, but could be indifferent to an astral traveler. It really just depends. Best not to risk it though, because they can actually be more dangerous than even the most horrifying astral entities. They still have a body. Well, most of the time. They can follow the astral traveler home and influence their waking lives for the worse from very, very far away. The dark occultist, though, is very easy to distinguish compared to a normal one. This is just based off the energy they emanate, so they should be avoided. The next entity I'm going to talk about that inhabits the astral plane are the spirit guides, and of course the spirit animals. Now, there's so many different opinions and perspectives on what these benevolent entities are that I can't possibly go over them all. I actually have personally went through a ceremony with Native Americans about a decade ago to discover what my spirit animal was, which is also known as a medicine animal. It was awesome. I was in a teepee with a hole dug in the ground and steaming hot rocks thrown in. It was really a great experience. Native American beliefs on medicine animals really resonate with me. But at first I was kind of bummed out what my spirit animal was, though I was a teenager at the time, and only later realized how badass and awesome it really is. Most people, though, in the West see their guides as spirit guides, whom usually resembles a human of some sort, though most supposed experts on the subject say that their natural form is spiritually divine. They just take on a form that's most pleasing to those they guide. Some traditions state that they were actually once human beings, but their souls are just evolved beyond ours and have earned a divine duty. Other traditions state that they were never human and are beings who just inhabit the higher levels of the astral plane and are following a divine plan. In any case, they're there to do what their name suggests. Though these entities 100% believe in free will, and usually won't make their presence known or interfere with the humans they guide in any way. They guide from a distance, and very, very subtly. This even means that the person is being attacked by negative entities. However, they do come if they're called upon. They aren't all powerful, but they can help keep a projector safe. And they can help guide you to places or teach you how to exist in the astral plane, I guess. They're very useful, but they ain't gonna come unless called. Demons also inhabit the astral plane, and are one of the top most dangerous entities an astral traveler can come across. Now you could translate them as the Christian type of demon because they definitely fit the bill. But the word demon actually comes from the Greek word daemon, which weren't considered flat-out evil entities at all, more so spirits all in between. It was when Romanized Christianity took over Europe that they just categorized all spirits as demons. But the image you think of as demons in movies and TV shows and whatnot are very real in the astral, and can even have much more of an influence on our physical reality than, well, I guess it's just easier than a lot of other astral entities, making them some of the most powerful beings that can be encountered there and beyond. In some cases, they're called the Dark Angels, or the Archons, and are wholly malevolent to humans. They're responsible for an infinite amount of suffering on all planes of existence, and have a huge influence in our waking material world. They vary in size and shape, but are always horrifying to look upon, and can even cause insanity. Demons can kill astral travelers, and will most assuredly inflict pain and suffering on any astral projector unlucky enough to meet one. Though they do mostly come only if they're invited in some way. but any OBE explorer with half a brain avoids demons at all costs. Then there's their counterparts, the angels. Though to people who don't subscribe to Christian terminology, they're called celestials. They inhabit the higher vibrational realms of the astral and beyond, but can really travel anywhere they wish. The lower classes of these divine beings act as a guardian-type police force of the astral plane, and make sure that nasty things don't get out of hand or entities don't go where they don't belong. This includes humans. Now, a lot of writings on these beings are woo-woo and cringy, but though they are benevolent, these Enochian beings can be very alien and scary. But tough love is still love, and most seem to have a lot of patience for human limitations. They can be disguised and take the form of terrifying entities to essentially test the mettle of an astral traveler. If the projector can overcome their fear, they're allowed much more free reign and access to the astral plane. So, when an evil entity is encountered, it's actually not always an evil entity, but a test. Angels will also take on intimidating forms to guard the gates into certain areas of the astral plane. And confronting these guardians or trying to force their way through them will almost always lead to a bad time for the projector. But they are beings of high vibration and love nonetheless. Many are in the form of what one may think an angel should be, but they really don't have any limitations on any forms they can take, and most likely appear pretty much unique to each individual person. Angels taking on forms that are most pleasing to people or the most efficient for the task at hand, I guess. They're led by the archangels, or high celestials if you prefer that, the top four being the angels of the elements. Raphael, archangel of air. Michael, archangel of fire with his flaming sword. Gabriel, archangel of water. And Oriel, archangel of earth. But there are tons of different categories of Enochians, and all with different aspects to them. The next type of inhabitant of the astral plane is the dead. Erin Paulina has a scary account of meeting the dead in her book, The Astral Projection Guidebook I mentioned earlier. One night she was flying through the ether when all of a sudden a dead man confronted her. It was a man who was burned alive, so his flesh was all gross and he looked pretty scary to say the least. He projected a vision into her head of his house burning down and he asked for help. The Revenant wasn't really sure what was going on, but Erin was pretty unsettled by the spirit's appearance and just basically told him he was dead before leaving because he scared her. She didn't really have the experience necessary to deal with that sort of thing yet. So there's lots of people who look like a murder scene when wandering around in the astral plane. Some compassionate astral travelers commit themselves to finding these confused souls and helping them comprehend what's happened to them and move on in their soul's evolution. But there are the dead who know they're dead. Some of them try and plug in a sense, to people still living. They do this to enjoy their vices that they had in the material plane while alive vicariously, and can actually have a pretty decent influence on people this way. A dead alcoholic's gonna attach themselves to an alcoholic and try and keep that person drinking. A person with anger issues is going to attach themselves to somebody who's pissed off all the time and try and instigate that person to anger. Somebody who is a sex fiend is going to attach themselves to somebody who's promiscuous and influence them to have all kinds of sex. You get the idea. They can actually continue doing this for a while, at least until they realize that they must let go of their earthly obsessions and move on. But these are just a certain group of the dead in the astral plane. They can also go to the infernal or higher divine realms. This could be interpreted as heaven or hell, I guess, if you're a Christian. But to other beliefs, especially those who believe in reincarnation, these places are just temporary stays. And then there's the people who create their own afterlife in the astral without even knowing it. Their subconscious basically creating an entire dream world around them. These worlds can pretty much be a copy of the material world that they lived in when they were alive, or they can be totally bizarre fantasy worlds. Overall, though, after the physical vessel is destroyed, what happens to people in the astral is pretty much based off of what they believed in or their mindset while they were alive. But the progression or maturity of their consciousness, aka soul, also has a huge influence. However, I should probably state that there's a lot of people who think that the astral body is the soul, but most consider the astral body just another vessel like the physical body. Some traditions state that when far enough along, the consciousness actually leaves the astral body. Then the astral body is left to decay in the astral plane, just like the physical body is left to decay on Earth. These abandoned vessels have a copy of all of that person's experiences, and can be roused in an imitation of life. They normally just drift on the tides of the ether like a corpse, though. But if they come across the aura of somebody who has developed psychic abilities or anything of that nature, they can be roused to life. Or even on the astral plane, if one of these corpses is approached, it can all of a sudden spring to life and scare the crap out of the projector. They are just hollow shells, though, and a copy of the consciousness that once resided in it, and pretty much harmless. That is, unless these shells are possessed, which is actually very easy for entities to do. I really could go on about the dead in the astral plane, because there's a lot more stuff I could cover. But there's no putting a finger on such an ineffable subject, and I don't have time to cover them all. A common thread, though, between all traditions is that humans always move on to the next stage of their soul's journey. Eventually. Some quicker than others. Like in some cases, certain suicides can make a person devolve and deteriorate to become an astral monster themselves. This goes for evil people, too. There are many evil entities on the astral plane that were once human. Then there's the astral vampires, called that pretty much because they look like Nosferatu. Beady red eyes, talons, bald head with pointy ears, and fangs. But like anything in the astral, they can have a variety of different appearances. These inhabitants of the astral plane are a little bit more enigmatic, because I could find very little information on them other than just encounters. Well, at least anything I deemed credible. They love to play mind games with people through telepathic influence. They're very sadistic and will cause conflict in people's lives to feed off the negative energy. They really like, in particular, influencing loved ones to be at each other's throats. And these are one of those negative entities in the astral plane that could have possibly once been human. Some accounts say that they made pacts with evil forces, or performed dark occult magic on themselves to become the way they are. But they could have also just always been vampiric interdimensional entities. Or who knows, I guess if vampires are real, they could just be a vampire astral projecting? I really don't know. But they are strong and dangerous astral entities. Their feeding can cause an early death and make that person permanently in a state of fatigue. Like sleeping seems to have no effect on rejuvenating a person who's been a victim. And once in someone's life, unless banished somehow, it will always come back to feed on its victim's life force. The next inhabitants of the astral plane are the Ascended Masters, whom are also called the Hidden Masters or the Secret Chiefs. These are benevolent guides who watch over humanity as a whole, and whose ranks consist of people from all races and cultures throughout history. They teach us in subtle ways without ever violating our free will or our natural progression as societies. Ascended Masters were once normal humans caught up in the cycle of karmic evolution like the rest of us. They've just come to the peak of spiritual growth through their many incarnations and attainments of enlightenment. And they are the epitome of wise. But they're just about over the edge to the next stage of existence, which some believe is to become a god in another dimension of reality. There's a decent amount of mystery traditions and spiritualists who claim that their teachings come from these higher humans, and that they even incarnate in flesh and walk amongst human societies from time to time. But they are the peak of human ascension, and far more than a mere human being even in a normal incarnation. Some ascended masters are well known as religious figures from various cultures, though they never walk openly amongst us declaring who and what they are, other than maybe perhaps to a select few. To us, they have what could seem as supernatural abilities, like performing miracles, for example. There's actually an ascended master that's said to live in the ether under Mount Shasta in California, but they're also allegedly at other countless sacred locations across the planet. The Ascended Master's whole mission is to basically help humanity ascend in consciousness just like them. Well, that and help keep Earth's karmic energies in balance. In human form, Ascended Masters can basically live until they choose to die, like Count Saint Germain, who allegedly wandered across Europe for 695 years. Alright, here we are. The last entities that are inhabitants of the astral plane I'm going to cover are the Devas. Depending on the culture, they go by different names, because they could also be called the god forms, or basically the archetypes of countless deities throughout human history. And on the astral plane, they exist in the highest of the high or the lowest of the low, but can manifest wherever they please. These beings go hand in hand with the notion, on the astral plane, we perceive based off of our own beliefs and what our consciousness is able to comprehend. I mentioned Thoth earlier. Well, he's one of the god forms. Here's some examples of other god forms. Themis is the goddess of wisdom, truth, and balance to the ancient Greeks. Ma'at is the goddess of wisdom, truth, and balance to the ancient Egyptians. When the Greco-Egyptian worlds came together in ancient times, this culture was known as Coptic, and their pantheons merged. They then worshipped a new goddess of wisdom, truth, and balance, called Ta-Me. But in the astral plane, they are all the same entity. In ancient times, when priests would journey to the astral plane, they would see the goddess that represents their culture. These god forms are avatars of the actual God, if you believe in that. Think of a centipede, and then think that God is the centipede itself, and a god form is one of its many legs. In this sense, all ancient cultures were kind of united in a way. The Greeks, Persians, Egyptians, Vikings, Indians, Chinese, you name it. They are god archetypes, and some of the highest and most divine beings in this version of the universe. Okay, this was my best attempt to gather a compilation of as much lore regarding the astral plane as I possibly could for you. And I hope you enjoyed all the crazy, weird stuff, especially if this is your first introduction to the astral plane. I did leave out a lot of entities that inhabit the astral plane, but that is just because they fit nicely into the category of elemental. And even with all this information I presented, it's still just the tip of the iceberg regarding the material out there on the astral plane. This information is very, very dense, and I left out a lot of other perspectives and beliefs concerning this fourth dimension. But I'm sure it's been more than enough to give an overview of what the astral plane is all about. And remember, I'm not trying to say that any of this is fact. I'm just presenting the ideas and information. Only you can choose what's real. However, I do hope that you found these abstract ideas fascinating. But this show's a wrap. I'm your host, Tim Hacker, and I'll see you next time on Cryptic Chronicles.